Thank you for staying with Daybreak. The conversation starts right now on the state of the nation. We talk about matters, politics, and everything in between them. My guest already with me, Eric Oyoo, governance and security expert. Thank you for making time. Suba Churchill, Executive Director, Kenya National Civil Society Center. Thank you very much for making time. And Joshua Nyamori, a lawyer. Thank you very much for making time. We're still waiting for Honorable Dan Manzo, the Senator from Makueni. He says he's on his way here. As soon as he comes in, we'll drop him into this discussion. But okay, let me start with you on this. And it's the front page of the Standard, and the dailies are awash with the ordeal, the torture ordeal that one and Nicholas Oyoo and Bob Njagi went through in Uganda. The Standard is calling it the weak-kneed diplomat and saying Foreign Affairs CS Musalia Mudavadi is facing mounting criticism for his muted response to the growing abuse of Kenyans in neighboring countries. Are we staring at a diplomatic precipice, or as a country do we have to be a bit more careful?
Thank you, Trevor. I have followed very closely the narration of this ordeal by Njagi and Oyoo. I have also listened to the Honorable Musalia Mudavadi and his peers talk about how President Museveni spoke metaphorically, and that in their view, nothing was out of hand. The greatest responsibility of any government is the protection of life of its citizens. That's cardinal. One would have by now expected a diplomatic protest note to Uganda by this government through my friend, the Honorable Mudavadi. But the problem is, Honorable Mudavadi is tired. You look at him, you see him walk, you see him address the media, you almost don't believe he's in charge of that docket. If you draw any comparison between him and his predecessor, it's like day and night. I think that the government failed these two gentlemen, Oyoo and Njagi, and that with these happenings, they can actually seek compensation from government, because it is now clear that they were held by a foreign government which enjoys some bit of treaty with ours. We still have a diplomatic relationship. We have our ambassador there. The absence of that protest note of a diplomatic nature suggests the complacency of our government with its neighbor, the tormentor of its citizens. Yes.
Churchill, what do you make of this? Is this a diplomatic goof, or should we be a bit more careful the way they said? Because they have mentioned several times that the laws that apply in the states where you are should be taken into account, and not this state where you come from. And they were cautioning the activists from stepping beyond the border, saying there are certain freedoms that they might enjoy here in Kenya that are not guaranteed in our neighboring countries. Is that a valid reason, or have we simply just failed diplomatically?
Okay, first of all, you know, what happened to our brothers, Njagi and Oyoo, ought not to have happened in the first place. I first want to apportion blame on the authorities in Uganda, because a government that has been in power for all those years ought not to be so insecure as to be scared of two civilians who are merely donning some quasi-military headgear. So it tells you how insecure some of the authorities in the region are. And for me, the ordeal that the two gentlemen went through, they are people I know very well, is a continuation of what we see every day. It's a continuation of the harassment of fisher folks from Busia. We have seen it around Migingo. And I think some authorities in the region are just taking advantage of the strategic interests that Kenya has with them, and probably taking it too far. You have heard again, even after, you know, the two gentlemen were released, some thinly veiled, you know, reference to war in future over the Indian Ocean. And so you see where the blackmail comes from. And because of those strategic interest that Kenya has with Uganda, the authorities there will want to use and abuse Kenya's strategic interest for their own political goals. And of course, you know, currently their elections are going to be there soon in Uganda. And so if you see what the leadership in Uganda says immediately after the release of the gentleman, then you begin to see the link. Why they were not in a hurry, and why fisher folks in Busia who do not even know where the boundary of the waters of Lake Victoria end with those of Uganda, and the fisher folks in Homa Bay, those parts of Migingo and so on, are constantly harassed, and it is meant to provoke Kenya into starting war over, you know, the rocky island in Migingo, over the fisher folk, so that they can flex their muscle. And you've seen it again also, even with our neighbors that has just recently had elections in Tanzania. They do all manner of things, yet, you know, in the streets, a number of the vendors we see, you know, are nationals from those countries, and Kenyans have really shown a lot of you know, hospitality and you know, goodwill to. In fact, personally, whenever I meet them, I call them Afrika Mashariki, because that should be the spirit. Okay. There is also, of course, a sense in which the government of Kenya didn't act fast, but of course, perhaps aware of these strategic interests. Uganda, for example, is today's Kenya's greatest trading partner, and they're alive to this. And so they'll do all manner of things because they think that Kenya needs them more than they need Kenya. Okay. And so if we are to continue with the latent spirit of the East African integration as espoused in the treaty, then I think at the highest level, our own President, His Excellency President William Ruto, ought to reach out and say, you know, don't expose me too much. Okay. You know, there's a way in which these things can be done at that level, and where, you know, at the heads of state, they say, yes, we have all these, you know, interests to pursue, but don't take it too far in a manner as to expose me to the vulnerability of our position with respect to the security of our citizens. Okay. But I want to cite an example before I hand over to the next speaker. You know, one country in Africa that is very good at protecting its citizens is Nigeria. And what Nigeria normally does, I'm not advising Kenya to do that because it's a very crude way of addressing some of those concerns. But what Nigeria does, if you arrest, you remember even when we had the Chinedu issue, and Kenya, during the times of Otieno Kajwang as Minister for Immigration, found that Chinedu had been dealing in, you know, illicit drugs and so on and so forth, and they were deported. They detained our aircraft and said, you know, we are not releasing this until our citizen has said his property. We have no problem with being deported, but his property says he has left his property there. So can you bring his property so that we release the aircraft? Okay. Now, what again Nigeria does is to, at times when it is extreme, unlike what they did with the aircraft, is to say, okay, you are holding this number of our citizens. They'll quickly move around, instruct the police to round up citizens of that national and lock them up so they can begin negotiating from a position of advantage also. Yeah. And so Nigeria in Africa has demonstrated that indeed when they talk about sovereignty of their people,
yes,
then they are ready to take, at times very crude and, harsh measures to pay in kind any mistreatment of their citizens. Of course, I'm not saying that Kenya should do that, but it is something that has been happening and we are all aware of it.
Let me bring in Nyamuri on this. Nyamuri, are we showing diplomatic weakness or restraint?
Yeah, first and foremost, I think we need to celebrate the fact that Njagi and Nicholas Oyoo are back. I remember I was in your show a while back when I said I pray for them because they are my friends and I've worked with them previously in advocacy. Be that as it may be important to balance between our rights and our obligations to the region. And the fact that as citizens we need to feel free wherever we go. And indeed, the EAC Treaty and the African Charter entrench, human rights in their frameworks. However, as we do that, as I hold the position that we need to be practical as a country and realize that the freedom that we enjoy in the streets of Nairobi, Kisumu, Mombasa, Machakos, are not the same in these other countries. Kenya is light years ahead in terms of democratization, the rule of law, and human rights. And that it is a reality that the streets of Kampala, Kigali, Juba are not as safe. And therefore, when our citizens go out there, it is important that we advise them to, balance their rights with the obligations to, conform to the laws and the rules of those countries and the lived experience in those countries, and not necessarily, what is written in the treaties.
Yeah.
And we will protect our citizens more by advising them to be safe, rather than leaving them to get into trouble. Then we start getting into conflicts and negotiations with these foreign, with our neighbors. It is also important to appreciate that there are certain, core mandates of our coming together in the region, majorly to trade, and for socio-cultural interactions, and that when the treaty was being crafted, it was never envisaged that part of the reasons why we are getting integrated as a community is to export activism to various countries. So it is important that our citizens know that they might not receive the same protection that they expect to receive under our judicial system, and the civil societies in those countries are not as strong as we may have here to champion for them. Even that as it may, we must continue to use the channels that are available, and they're diplomatic channels. And I think the Cabinet Secretary, the Prime Cabinet Secretary, who is also in charge of foreign affairs, Musalia Mudavadi, has done very well in terms of diplomatic relations to engage our neighbors within the structures of EAC and the AU to improve, their human rights standards, to ensure that as we continue to trade and to interact, that our citizens, just like their citizens, would be safe wherever they are.
Okay, and Honorable Manzo is joining us now from Senator from Makueni. Thanks for making time. When we walked in, we were just talking about the front page of the Standard, and it's also part of the front page of the Daily Nation. We Need Diplomat, our torture ordeal, and Oyoo and Njagi were here last evening speaking about their ordeal. And the question is, are we dealing with a diplomatic weakness or diplomatic restraint when it comes to how the CS Musalia Mudavadi handled this entire conversation? Eric Okeyo says that Mudavadi is tired and is not in charge.
Well, I went to Uganda twice following up this matter. I know Bob Njagi very well and Oyoo. I've been their lawyer here. I remember Bob Njagi had been abducted here, and we went to court and filed an habeas corpus through the Law Society of Kenya. And he was released the night Masengeli, the then acting IG, was going to jail. That night is when he was released. And I think, you see, Honorable Musalia claims to have written a diplomatic protest. You see, a minister can only write to a fellow minister in their respective country. And I can assure you, the so-called diplomatic protest never got to President Museveni. The matter was much above him. The chief diplomat of the country is the president of the country. And I can assure you, was it not for the intervention of President Uhuru Kenyatta, these people would not be here up to today. So there is no diplomacy really be practiced around. We have a lot of innocent Kenyans suffering in Tanzania, and I'm sure he's doing nothing about it. He's not likely to access, because he can only access the equivalent minister in Tanzania. The matters are being decided much higher than that minister. In fact, the Minister of Foreign Affairs approach a president on such a matter, they will be sacked the same day. So it's just more talk here, very empty talk, which is not effective at all, and not only in Eastern African communities, even many Kenyans, in many parts of the world, and a lot of them, out of economic hardships, have gone to Arabia. They have died there. They have been mistreated. Every other day, we are bringing questions to the House on a Kenyan stuck, in one part of the world or another, and especially in the Arab world, and even the diplomats there, the diplomats we have sent in those regions, are not powered enough. This is a matter which is really, when such a serious situation arises, it should be dealt president to president.
Okay. I'll take a quick commercial break. When you come back now, we talk about the matters politics in just a bit. In fact, the president is in your region, so we'll start from that conversation shortly. I think you actually with him yesterday. I think I saw a picture with you yesterday, or with the president. We'll talk about that shortly. Let's take a quick break. We're back with much more.